National Coordinating Committee is the result of a 4-year study. It will be debated by the General Council of the United Church next summer at a meeting in British Columbia. Bodine Williams has this report.
The United Church has always been progressive in its views, but has never gone as far as it has in the report on sexual orientation. In essence, the report concludes
that sexual orientation in and of itself is not a barrier to participation in all aspects of the life and ministry of the Church.
Recommendations from the report have already split the committee. Among the most controversial findings, we acknowledge that heterosexual, gay, and lesbian adults can engage in sexual behavior within a committed relationship with the intention of permanence that is morally responsible. And it continues, the standards for discerning whether sexual behavior is morally responsible are the same, irrespective of orientation or marital status. A church leader was asked if the United Church would go so far as to allow homosexual marriages.
The General Council perhaps ought to discuss that option of entering into some kind of a covenantal relationship for those who are not legally married in our country.
The church leaders reminded reporters that the recommendations in the report must still be debated. That debate started almost immediately. A dissenter on the committee is John Howard, a minister of the church who was a practicing homosexual for 20 years.
The scripture is very clear that God does not approve of homosexual behavior. And if the United Church at this time makes a decision reversing that, then I believe the church is really going against solid scriptural teaching.
The United Church has been voicing greater tolerance for homosexuals for many years.
But this report goes beyond that. When the General Council meets in Victoria this summer, they will be asked to debate recommendations that many feel actually endorse the gay lifestyle.
But when he met reporters, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney wasn't ready to guarantee that there will be a free vote.
Will there be a free vote?
I don't know. I indicated in response to an early questioner that I hadn't made up my mind on that.
Mulroney concedes that, like the nation, the Tory caucus is also divided on this issue.
It was an occasion today to discuss very carefully some of the deeper implications, very deeply held views and emotions that surround an issue like this.
Have you reached a consensus on it?
Not really.
What are some of those points, sir, that are causing you to pause and reflect?
Well, it's the most complex issue that has confronted the Parliament of Canada probably in 25 years.
The Prime Minister says the issue is so complex, it's impossible to say when legislation will be tabled in the Commons.
I can't give you a time frame, simply because it'll take me a little while longer to get my own thoughts in order in terms of some of the important points that have been made.
MPs on all sides of the Commons would like to see this issue resolved well before the next general election.
Nothing good comes from abortion. Abortion is murder.
Today, this lone protester waited hours to deliver his anti-abortion message. But there will undoubtedly be many more heard from before this issue is finally resolved. Mike Duffy, CBC News, Ottawa.
We'll have more on the abortion story with some indication of what's likely to be in the legislation later on tonight's panel. Meanwhile, as the Conservative MPs were meeting this afternoon, many of their spouses were at another meeting just across the street. There, the big topic was the government's proposed new conflict of interest legislation. David Holton reports.
It's unusual for Tory spouses to be so upset by a proposed Conservative law, in this case the new conflict proposals, which require the financial dealings of all MPs' wives and husbands to be reported to an independent commission. Today, a number of spouses objected to that because they said it treats them as mere chattels of their partners and would effectively deny them an independent business career.
Yes, but perhaps as political spouses, we have no rights. And if that's the way it's to be, then once it's spelled out, then it's there.
Does that make sense, that as political spouses
we have no choice?
We have no choice.
I'm going along with it because I don't see any alternative. The way things are today, I don't agree with it. Well, it's important to live with it. I can't get John out of politics. Maybe I should go in myself. In fact, I threatened that this morning. I'm going to run for St. John's East, so...
Crosby says the Tory spouses are split about 50-50 on the issue. They decided today to meet Liberal and NDP spouses in an effort to work out a common approach to the legislation. David Halton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Other news now, the so-called War of the Cities is escalating in Iran and Iraq. Iraq fired 4 missiles into Tehran today and says it bombed 12 other Iranian communities. In return, Iran fired a missile into Baghdad, while its planes attacked 2 cities in northern Iraq. The week-long missile attacks led to a riot at the Soviet embassy in Tehran today. A crowd of Iranians threw stones and firebombs at the embassy and tried to break into the grounds. The Soviets say the riot was prompted by Iranian newspaper reports blaming Moscow for the Iraqi missile attacks. The Soviets say they have not supplied Iraq with missiles. American military helicopters came under a fierce barrage of machine gun fire as they patrolled over the Persian Gulf today. None was hit. The helicopters moved out of the line of fire and did not strike back. The attack was launched from an oil platform and several boats in the area. There's every indication that Iran was behind the attack. The Israeli cabinet met today to discuss the American peace plan for the Middle East, but the ministers couldn't even agree on when to respond to the proposal, let alone what that response should be. The plan that's dividing them is aimed at ending the violence in the occupied territories. Today, that violence took a new turn as protesters and troops took their battle to an unlikely location. Don Murray reports.
On a roof in Ramallah, the Shabab, the boys, raise the Palestinian flag and the battle is joined. Stones and bottles and boards versus